Hello, class. Welcome. As you can see, I have grown a depression beard and am coming to you from my living room. Um, I missed you all so much that I figured you probably missed me, and since I can't physically be with you guys, I figured I would at least make an appearance digitally. So I have some software, and I can share some PowerPoints and talk to you and let you see my depression beard. It's coming in very dirty, very dirty. So, um, for the foreseeable future, this is how I will be delivering brand new content to you. I'm making up new PowerPoints for you honors kids. It's going to be a little different. You'll probably like it because there's going to be a lot more words on the screen on level. It'll be pretty much the same, but we're going to try this out. I'll be asking for feedback as time goes on so we can, improve this process a little bit. It is a little weird, obviously. I've never done anything like this before. You guys probably haven't experienced it. It's very weird for me to just sit here and stare at the camera that is connected to my computer and my FBI agent. It's going to be a little different. To make you guys more comfortable, make me more comfortable, I am wearing a tie. So that this can be business as usual. Before we get started, a few announcements for you guys. Everyone's study guides are going to be due next week. Let's just go ahead and say Wednesday for the odd classes, Thursday for the even classes. I do want you to, ideally it's digital. That'd be easiest for me, hopefully easiest for you. You can just go to the Unit 5 folder on Schoology, type in what you need to. If you feel like you're way too far ahead with the handwritten and you want to take a picture of it, scan it, whatever, that's fine. I don't care. I'm going to be extremely flexible with all of these assignments. Just please, please get them to me. On level, especially, make sure your projects have been turned in. A number of you have not. That's a 0 out of 100. It's going to hurt your grade. So please get that to me. Third 9 weeks in soon. I don't know an exact date. I'm hearing it's been pushed back, maybe even into like the 20th, the 27th, something like that. I don't know as of recording this, but I'm going to be cutting off the third 9 weeks grading period here very shortly. So make sure all of you, if you have any missing work, you're getting that to me, you're communicating that to me as best you can. Please remember to check the update section on Schoology daily. Every odd morning before 9 a.m. I'm going to have up what your work is for that day. Same thing for you even kids. I'm going to have that up before 9 a.m. or by 9 a.m. at the latest every even day with your instructions. Please, this is all very weird. We're flying by the seat of our pants here. If you have any questions, any concerns, any problems, any comments, any criticism, feedback, anything at all, you just need to talk to someone that's not your parents or your little brother. Message me through Schoology, email me. My email is there on the screen here at mlamine@k12.wv.us. So please do not hesitate to reach out. If you need to turn in any work, you can use the email address. You can attach it in a Schoology message, upload it, whatever. I don't care. Just get me that work. All right? All right. So what we're going to do today is we are going to essentially end Unit 5 and begin Unit 6. So bad news for all of you. I don't know what I'm going to do as far as like testing, assessment, that kind of stuff goes. So as of right now, we're just not going to have a Unit 5 test. I know that's a bummer, but we're not going to have a Unit 5 test. We're going to just go ahead, touch on the last 2 topics of Unit 5 that we would have done like last week in class. We're going to finish that. We're going to move on into what would have been Unit 6. What I'm calling any of this, I don't know. We're just going to go through some content, and make sure we cover everything because, again, we have to kill Lincoln. I'm going to kill Lincoln. And we're getting into and I know I say this every unit, but we're getting into my absolute favorite stuff. So we are definitely going to move on and hit some brand new material starting today. We're going to cover 4 topics today. Now, what you guys might want to do, What you guys might want to do is pick some notes. How you want to do that, I don't know. I don't care if you want to watch this while you have open a Word document and type up notes. If you want to jot stuff down, obviously it's a video, so you can play, you can rewind as many times as you need to. Go and Google things that you have questions about, whatever. But I would take some notes. Also, you are going to, and this goes for everyone, on level, you're very used to this. Honors, this is going to be a little different, but all of you are going to open up a Word document or a Google Doc, and you are going to label that activity sheet. Label it activity sheet. And throughout, after every new content slide, every other new content slide, whatever, there's going to be a slide where there's going to be a question. And on your activity sheet, you are going to label number 1, number 2, number 3, whatever. You're going to answer those questions that are there. We're going to treat this kind of like a bell ringer in that I'm not going to have you upload it after every single lecture, but at some point, I will be saying, hey, we've done 2 lectures, we've done 3 lectures, whatever. Send me your activity sheet. So make sure you get your name on it. Make sure you are answering all parts of all questions. Feel free to pause the video when you need to, so you can do that on the fly as we go. All right, so that is what I got for you. Let's go ahead and get started with the end of the Age of Jackson and the birth of sectionalism. Now, our first topic today is going to tie together a number of topics that we talked about at the end of the last bit of notes that we did. So one of the last things we talked about was writing and how that inflamed tensions between the North and the South when you had those people that we called abolitionists, guys like David Walker, William Lloyd Garrison, when they started to write anti-slavery writings like David Walker's Appeal that said, hey, slaves, rise up violently. And that caused a lot of problems because the South said, hey, that's very dangerous. What if they do? Well, that's what we see here from Mr. Nat Turner. Now, Nat Turner is a slave. He is a literate slave, a lot like the guy that we talked about before, Denmark Vesey, the former slave who was illiterate. This is Nat Turner. He is a slave. He is illiterate. His master's wife taught him how to read. Partly out of sympathy, partly so he could read the Bible, because he was a very religious man, wanted to know how to read the Bible, wanted to be able to really get into the Word of God. So she teaches him to read, and he gets a bit of a, we can call it like a messiah complex, right? If you remember Denmark Vesey, when we talked about Denmark Vesey, one of the stories he told all the time was about the Israelites and their enslavement in Israel, and that gives the hope of, well, where's our Moses? Maybe we have a Moses. Nat Turner sees himself as a bit of a Moses. So in 1831, in a place called Southampton County, Virginia, where Nat Turner is living, he organizes about 70-ish people to rise up with him. Now, originally, they were going to rise up on July 4th, right? Independence Day. You can see the obvious irony there. But he gets sick, and he has to postpone the planned revolt. Then in early August, mid-August, August 13th or so, there is a meteorological anomaly of some sort that makes the sun appear a bluish green. This, to Nat Turner, is the sign from God that it is go time. And so he gets his co-conspirators together, and they rise up on August 21st, 1831, and they go on a rampage. They go on a killing spree. They go from plantation to plantation, slaughtering everyone they can come across. They had hoarded no weapons or no firearms, but had hoarded, as you can see, like from the picture here, handheld implements that they could use to bludgeon you to death or stab you to death. And they go from plantation to plantation, killing everyone. There are some whites that are able to arm themselves and try to defend their family. Others, like number 2 here, and his wife, number 1, and what appears to be dolls, but are probably small children, they're all going to be slaughtered. Over the course of these couple of days, August 21st, 22nd, 23rd, Nat Turner and these rebels slaughter around 60 whites. Many of them are women and children. Some of them even, babies in their cribs. It's pretty nasty. Although Nat Turner and the rebels, they do skip the poor whites. They go just for the wealthier plantation owners where slaves are found. They set the slaves free. They slaughter everyone that they need to, that they feel like they have to, and then they move on. Now, obviously, the local whites are going to freak out, and they do. The home guard, that militia that we've talked about before, that home guard that arose after Nat Turner, or after Denmark Vesey's conspiracy, they spring into action. There's about double or so the amount of local militia in Southampton County. They quickly try to stem the tide of this violence. A number of Nat Turner's co-conspirators are captured and hanged very quickly, although Nat Turner actually escapes. In the meantime, things get very bloody. A lot of the whites, a lot of the home guard, the militia, they don't know who to trust. They're very scared. They're very shaken. And around 100 slaves or so are killed through lynchings, through mob violence, through the militia just seeing someone with the wrong color skin and pulling the trigger. Nat Turner, though, is on the run, and he hides out for a couple of months. He's not actually found until October 30th, hiding in a swamp nearby farm. He, too, will eventually be captured, sentenced to death. He's hanged to death. Then they take his corpse as a message to other people that might think that, hey, this is a good idea, and they draw and quarter it, meaning they cut off his limbs, they cut off his head, and they're essentially displayed and passed around as trophies, as a warning, as a message to others. So why is all this important, right? Who cares? This one is obviously much more bloody and therefore, to some people, more fascinating than Denmark Vesey's conspiracy, a rebellion that never happened. But what's really important about all this is going to be the reaction of the South, and the word of the day, the word of this whole time period, is going to be sectionalism, how it further drives a wedge between the North and the South. So first off, the most surprising reaction out of all of this is that Virginia and the Virginia legislature actually debates gradual emancipation, meaning they talk about maybe we should slowly free our slaves. Maybe it's just too dangerous to have slaves, not worth it. But ultimately, they think better of it and instead crack down. Now you get your enforced illiteracy, kind of like after Denmark Vesey. You get these this increased supervision. It is now illegal for slaves or people of African descent, be they free or not, to hold religious services without a white minister. Like, that's now a law. So they're really going to just crack down. They think maybe we should free everyone, and instead they go, no, we'll get more repressive. We'll get more violent towards slaves and especially free people. But really, what happens is there is this increased sectionalism because a lot of people in the South blame the North. They blame abolitionists, people like David Walker. They said, hey, you called for slaves to rise up and violently kill people. And guess what? That's exactly what happened. William Lloyd Garrison, you are putting out things like The Liberator, your abolitionist newspaper. You're calling slavery evil. You're calling us evil and saying that we deserve things like this. And then it happened. And then you just run behind and hide behind the Constitution. Things like freedom of speech, freedom to petition, right? We talked about the gag rule and how the South is going to insist that not even Congress talk about it. So freedom of the press, freedom of speech, freedom of petition. You're hiding behind the Constitution. You're hiding behind these rights, but they're leading to violence. Right now, obviously, the South is not going to look inward and say, maybe we hold some responsibility, for actually owning humans and treating them this way. But the South is going to very much blame the North for a lot of this. Some abolitionists who are a little ghoulish are going to sit on their high horse and say, hey, you had it coming. You deserved it. Nobody in the South wants to hear that. Nobody wants to hear anything other than full-throated condemnation for violence against women and children, which you can kind of see both sides there. If you're someone, it looks bad to say, yeah, well, that little girl had it coming. Her daddy is a slave owner, but this rebellion is going to make slavery more repressive, if that's possible, in the South, and it is going to drive a wedge between the North and the South even more than beforehand. Right, so this is the type of propaganda or political cartoons you would see in the newspapers. This is the most famous image that comes from the horrid massacre in Virginia of Nat Turner and his rebels. But these slaves are lionized by a lot of people, especially in free circles in the North, to the point where actually there is a 2016 movie called A Birth of a Nation that kind of fictionalizes, kind of accurately depicts Nat Turner, his religiousness, his charisma, and how he was able to organize and ultimately execute one of the bloodiest slave uprisings in American history. Now, this is one of those parts where you are going to need your separate document labeled activity sheet. This is number one. Now, for you on-level guys and gals, you know what to do here because you're used to doing this, adding this to your bell ringer. Honors students, what you're probably going to want to do is pause the video, go to that document, and read these questions, answer them. So what I got here for you is the South is going to blame Northerners in part for Nat Turner's rebellion. They're certainly not going to like how Nat Turner is defended, especially afterwards. Northern abolitionists are going to defend their actions by asserting that these actions, like rioting, organizing, sending petitions, they're all protected by the Constitution. We didn't do anything wrong. We wrote a newspaper article. We said, you're wrong for owning a human, right? We're not the one that's wrong. You are. My question to you is, in your opinion, is there or should there be a limit to someone's ability to speak, organize, and or petition as granted in the Constitution? Should there be a limit to that? Can you just say whatever you want? Can you print whatever you want? Can you petition for anything? Should there be a limit to that? Also, where in your own life does this or could this issue arise today? Right? Are there any things that affect you or could affect you, issues that maybe there should be a limit to how much we agitate for? Should the government be allowed to limit free speech in favor of safety? More, less, the same, what they already do, right? You can say a lot of things. You can't say anything. For example, you can't run into a crowded movie theater and yell fire if there's not actually a fire. It's illegal. Should we have more of that, less of that? What do you think? Why? Go ahead and pause it. Type out those answers. When you're ready, we'll be moving on to our next thing. The very handsome Martin Van Buren, a guy most of you have not heard of, a guy that I can't see. No. Oh, yeah. Van Buren boys, this is my softball jersey. Not that I'm going to need it. Thank you, coronavirus. But I told you, this is my life. This is who I am. Martin Van Buren, fantastic mutton chops. No hair on the top of his head. Not ashamed. Love it. He is going to be the successor to Andrew Jackson. He's our 8th president. He's a Democrat, second Democrat. He's handpicked by Jackson. He's actually going to be Jackson's vice president during his second term. He is a bit of a political wizard, which is why his nickname is the Wizard of Kinderhook, where he is from in New York, Kinderhook, New York. He kind of finagles out John C. Calhoun, yes, thankfully, the devil himself, and he becomes the vice president during the second term. And when it comes time for a new president in 1836, Jackson essentially taps Martin Van Buren on his giant nose and says, you're the guy. Tells rest of America, this is who I would like you to pick. Jackson's still very popular. Van Buren is able to secure the presidency. Now, he's great as an organizer. He's really good behind the scenes kind of guy, right? A lot of political wizardry. He is really the organizing force behind the Democratic Party. When they come together as a party to make decisions, to agree on nominees and platforms and planks and all of that parties have to, the way we understand parties to work, he's really, really good at that. He's not a good leader. He's not so good with inspiring people, right? He doesn't have the charisma of an Andrew Jackson, right? He clearly doesn't have that striking figure. He doesn't have the military experience. He's not a great leader of men. He's much more passive. He likes to sit back and let things take their course, right? He's a small government, strict constructionist kind of guy, which is really going to cause some problems in his term because really he spends his 4 years in office dealing with Jackson's messes. He inherits things like the native removal, right? We talked about before, the Trail of Tears. That's Jackson's policy, but a lot of the Trail of Tears is going to happen on Van Buren's watch. He's not going to have the backbone or really the will or even really want to stand up and say, no, this is wrong. Right? That's not what most Americans thought at the time anyhow. But that's going to get to stain his legacy, right? He gets dragged into that thanks to Jackson. And then the biggest issue that Van Buren faces throughout his term is the Panic of 1837, right? We've talked about, at least in honors, we talked about what a panic is. That is just it's exactly what it sounds like, but it's an economic collapse. It's a sudden economic collapse where people really start to freak out. Kind of like what we're seeing now, except in a panic, it's even more panic-inducing. People are literally making runs on banks. Banks are just going out of business because everyone's showing up saying, give me my money, give me my money, give me my gold, take this paper and turn it into gold for me. And then banks go out of business and everything spirals very quickly. That happens in 1837. It is one of the largest recessions or depressions even in American history. It's going to last until the mid 1840s. Van Buren doesn't do much. A lot of the fault goes to no one. It's just kind of what happens in an economy sometimes. It's called the boom bust cycle. Things go really well and then they fall off a cliff. And that was happening worldwide. But things were even worse here in America thanks to Andrew Jackson, thanks to his murdering of the second bank in the United States and replacing it with pet banks. Who would have thought that giving a ton of government money to really small banks that were your political pals could possibly go wrong? But it does when they overprint way too much money. They speculate, land prices go way up. There's essentially a bubble. You guys are too young to remember this, but in '08, we had a housing bubble. Too many people were buying houses. The prices of houses were going up way too much. Credit was too easy to get. They'd give a loan to anyone. They'd sell a house to anyone. And then all of a sudden, the bubble burst and the economy collapsed. That's kind of what happened here, except instead of houses, it was Western land. It was people moving west trying to buy Indiana, Illinois, Arkansas. I mean, who the heck would ever want to live there? But people were trying to move there. They were that desperate, I guess, for land. Sorry, at least. But that is going to be left to Van Buren. Right? It's really not his fault that the economy collapses, but he's going to get to be left to pick up the pieces. And as a guy who is an organizer, not a leader, as a guy who is much more passive, he doesn't do much. He has an idea for something called an independent treasury. I'm not going to explain that. You can look it up if you want. It's a good idea. Goes nowhere, partly because lack of charisma. And so he doesn't really do much. He kind of takes the blame. He becomes known as Martin Van Ruin. And his entire 4 years is very much tarnished by this panic, this economic collapse, this huge slowdown. One of my favorite quotes here tells you a lot about Van Buren, saying how, because you got to keep in mind all this, the process of the Industrial Revolution is going on. He is clearly an older gentleman when he becomes president. The world's changing. It's changing quickly. And he's not quite sure it's always for the better, right? 15 miles per hour. The Almighty certainly never intended that people should travel at such breakneck speed. Right, what we have here, this, again, looks eerily familiar if you're following the news at all, but you have the stock market and its overall prices and how it just absolutely collapses from its high in 1835, starts to go down a little bit. Sudden drop there. You can see the panic and just how straight of a line this goes down. Takes a while for it to ever rebound. But at some point, right, hopefully in our world, we're nearing that point if we're not already there. You eventually hit bottom and things will get better. But Van Buren takes the blame. Unfortunately, Jackson doesn't get all the blame, but he definitely gets a little bit, as you can see in this political cartoon called A New Edition of Macbeth. Banquo's ghost right here. This old lady is Andrew Jackson, and he is clearly has his arm on the shoulder of Van Buren and is there he is frightened by the ghost of the bank, right? The ghost of commerce, right? All of this stuff, right? The removal of the treasury order, that's the pet bank stuff, nullification, all sorts of things that went down, mostly in Jackson's presidency, have murdered the economy, murdered commerce. Poor Van Buren has to deal with it. Again, might be time for a pause, might be time for you to take a break. What you're going to want to do, though, is go back to that activity sheet and answer these questions. So we have here for number 2. So on your activity sheet, you should have number 1, a couple questions. Number 2, a couple answers here. How should a president be judged? What makes a president a good president or a bad president? And then, and this is an issue, especially you on-level kid, or dang it, you honors kids we're dealing with in our first discussion on Jacksonian democracy, is it fair to judge past presidents by present standards, right? The how democratic was Andrew Jackson question. How you answer that kind of depends on how you answer, is it fair to judge him by our standards of democracy or his? Is that fair to judge a past president by present standards? Then, second part here, like today, President Van Buren faced a major economic downturn, seemingly out of nowhere. Should a president be held accountable for the economy, especially if that economy operates largely out of his control, right? Today, before the coronavirus pandemic, President Trump was always saying, hey, look how good things are economically. Look at the stock market, even though he doesn't really have a lot of control over that. Should we give people like President Trump credit for a good economy, bad economy, or how should they be held accountable on big things like that? So you might want to go ahead and pause before we move on. We got 2 topics left, 1 more activity question slide to go, and then we'll be done. Unfortunately, we have moved into one of my least favorite stories of the entire year. I'm actually really glad that a number of you guys are at home and not in my living room, because when I tell this story, there's always people, Klaus, who are going to really hurt my feelings and make fun of me for my love of Henry Clay, thanks to how all of this goes down. But what we have is our next election, the election of 1840. The election of 1840. It is time to pick a new president. Now, at the time, Van Buren's president, but it's really hard to win re-election when your nickname is Martin Van Ruin and everyone blames you for a terrible economy. Fair or not, he's getting the blame. It seems pretty clear the Democrats aren't going to win. Van Buren's not going to win re-election. The Whigs are, yeah, right? Your boy, Henry Clay, his party, the Whigs, they're going to win. All they have to do, really, is pick someone to run against Van Buren, and they're going to win. That person's going to win. Now, Henry Clay thinks, obviously, that should be me, right? And it should have been. But Henry Clay is overruled by the rest of the party, essentially. And they decide they don't want a guy who was falsely accused of the corrupt bargain to be the face of their party when they're definitely going to win. They don't want a guy who's been in Congress for a while. They want their version of Andrew Jackson. Right? They want a war hero. They want a Westerner. They want a guy with a little charisma, with a lot of name recognition, and all that name recognition is good, right? Andrew Jackson essentially said, "Hey, New Orleans, you're welcome. Killed a bunch of natives. I should be president." That is William Henry Harrison, right? We talked about him a while ago, right before and during the War of 1812. So he's getting pretty old at this point. He's like 67. But he's famous for fighting against Tecumseh and the Prophet and their confederacy, and he alleges he is the one who pulled the trigger and killed Tecumseh at the Battle of the Thames in the War of 1812. So he is seen as the Whigs' version of Andrew Jackson. Henry Clay is miffed, right? He's really upset. He is the leader of the party. He's the philosopher of the Whig Party, and they're going with someone else. But the Whigs come to him with the offer to be vice president. They say, "Clay, it's not your time. We want old Tippecanoe, William Henry Harrison. He is going to be our nominee, but you should be the vice president. And Henry Clay says, no way, man. It's presidency or nothing, right? Especially because vice presidents, they have no power. He feels like that is going to be a political dead end and maybe the end of his career. He's never going to go anywhere. He's never going to get to do anything politically if he accepts the vice presidency, right? Other than like John Adams being vice president to George Washington, vice presidents don't have a good history at this point of American history of moving from the vice presidency to the presidency. So Henry Clay declines. He says, no thanks. I'll keep my congressional job. I'll get stuff done there. I'll be Speaker of the House. So William Henry Harrison runs, and as everyone knew, he wins. He defeats Van Buren. Van Buren becomes the first non-Adams to be a one-term president. And the worst thing that could possibly happen to the Whig Party and Henry Clay specifically happens 31 days into old Tippecanoe's presidency. The story always goes that William Henry Harrison gives a really long inaugural address, right, on March 4th, longest inaugural address to date at that point. It's cold, it's rainy, he doesn't wear a top hat, doesn't wear a jacket, he's 67, gets pneumonia, and dies 31 days later, April 4th. So who's going to become president? Well, the vice president, the guy that should have been maybe Henry Clay, Tippecanoe's running mate, John Tyler. First time a president has died in office. People are a little freaked out, don't know what to do, so John Tyler very quickly takes the oath of office, becomes the 10th president. So just like that, we go from 8 to 10, with William Henry Harrison doing nothing of note other than dying. But who's this John Tyler guy? Well, he is picked for vice president after Henry Clay turns it down to balance the ticket. Tippecanoe, Harrison, he's a Westerner, he's a Northerner. So what do we need? Well, we need someone from the South and the eastern part of the country. That's John Tyler. He is a Southerner from Virginia. So he's from the South, he's from the East, comes from some money. He's going to balance the ticket, right? Once Clay turns down the vice presidency, doesn't really matter who the vice president is until all of a sudden, oh no, Harrison is dead. Well, John Tyler, as it turns out, used to be a Democrat. He was a Democrat for a while, didn't really like Andrew Jackson, and flips over to being a Whig. But when he becomes president, people look at him and say, hey, you aren't really the president, man. You got lucky that an old man got pneumonia and died. Here's a bunch of bills that Congress wants signed into law. Go ahead and sign them, please. And John Tyler asserts his independence and his power as president. And he vetoes a number of things. But these are Whig bills. These are things from Henry Clay, like a third bank. He vetoes that. So John Tyler gets himself kicked out of the Whig Party. First time the Whigs take the presidency, their dude dies, their vice president betrays them, they have to literally visit him and say, "You gone," kicks him out of the party. So I put here, Democrat turned Whig turned, because he's kind of an independent by the time his term is going to be over. The primary issue throughout a lot of this time period is Texas. Texas is the issue. What are we talking about? What is going on with Texas? Right. Well, here I mean, who would have thought this guy would have died immediately? Speaking of Texas, right? Last slide, last bit. Here we go. Texas is a Mexican province. It's owned by Mexico. As is what is now California, Nevada, New Mexico, Arizona. The country of Mexico is pretty new, having just won its independence from Spain, the decrepit empire. It's a new country. It's a huge country. It is a republic. It's a federal republic set up a lot like ours with states and provinces and a central government and sharing of power and all of that. But what is now Texas was very sparsely populated. It had some good land, but it was way too far away from the power center in Mexico. It was just too far away to have attracted many Mexicans there. So the Mexican government gets an idea. Well, this is just good land being wasted. what if we do something to attract settlers there? And so they offer land. They offer this pretty good land to anyone who will come and settle. And most of the people who choose to come to settle are Americans. They are American migrants moving to Mexico for an opportunity at a better life. They're told when you come here, you can get land. And many of these Americans are from the South, so they bring their slaves as well. They can grow cotton in large parts of Texas as well, if not be cattle ranchers, things like that. But they're told, it's very simple. You can come and live here. You got to become a Mexican citizen. You got to speak Spanish. You got to become Catholic. You got to pay your taxes to the Mexican government and obey the laws of the Mexican government, right? Is anyone picking up the irony in all of this? And a lot of, most of the people who go to this Mexican province of Texas are Americans from the South. So it's part of Mexico, but it's populated primarily with white Americans and their slaves. For a while, this all works out. You have guys like Samuel Houston and Stephen F. Austin, that are notable people there, that are leaders there. And eventually they become, at least in the eyes of the Mexican government, rabble rousers when, in 1829, Mexico outlaws slavery. This was a big no-no if you are an American and a Southerner and now a Texian slave owner. You want your slaves. You feel like you need your slaves. You feel like you're entitled to your slaves. That's going to be an issue. A lot of them are going to disobey the law because there's not a lot of presence by the Mexican government. So they're going to be like, well, technically it is illegal, but I'm not freeing my slave just because someone in Mexico City said to. But then the Mexican government gets a little alarmed and they make it illegal for Americans to move to Mexico. They make it illegal for Americans to move to Mexico. Right? Again, history doesn't always repeat, but sometimes it rhymes. And this royally upsets the Texians, the American Texans, in Spanish Mexico. They want their friends and family to be able to come. They want more Americans to be able to come. They don't want this to be necessarily part of Mexico, maybe. Plus, the power structure inside of Mexico is changing, and the Texians feel like they are being left out and that the central government is becoming too strong. So there are these three big issues of slavery, immigration, and political power that convince a number of Texians that they need to do something. And this something is a rebellion. Now, at first, the rebellion isn't just for independence. Some people who fight aren't exactly sure what they're fighting for. Is it independence? Is it just a return to the old ways? Is it just a redress of grievances? Are we going to fight to allow slavery and immigration or get more political power? What are we going to do? Ultimately, they do settle on Texas should be independent. Texas should be an independent country. Now, things don't go well, at least early on. Now, this is not a super long rebellion. It only lasts from 1835 until, 1836. But it starts off very poorly when the president of Mexico, a man named Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna, invades with around 2,000 soldiers, and they surround and lay siege for 13 days to a Catholic mission outside of what is now San Antonio, called the Alamo. Number of famous people inside the Alamo, like Davy Crockett, and they surround the Alamo. They demand their surrender. The defenders, who are vastly outnumbered, and there's only about 250 or so Americans and Texans inside the Alamo, they hold out against the 1,500 to 2,000 Mexicans for 13 days. Ultimately, the Mexican army breaks in to the Alamo, and it becomes essentially a massacre. Only 5 or 7 out of 250 people live to tell the tale, which really infuriates a lot of Americans who are rooting for Texas and a lot of the people inside of Texas, especially those with American roots. This inspires the rebellion to actually get bigger, and spawns the battle cry, "Remember the Alamo." Um, and then to make matters worse, though, for the Texans and then eventually for Santa Anna, there is another massacre at Goliad where the Texans again lose a battle and surrender. And a lot of the people who surrendered are later massacred by Santa Anna and the Mexican army. So this is going to inspire more people to fight. This is going to inspire those people to fight harder because it appears like Santa Anna is in a take no prisoners mindset. And so you're going to fight to the death if you think that, well, surrender equals death. So the battle cries of "Remember the Alamo," "Remember Goliad," are going to go up. People are going to flock to the banner of Texas, this bottom right-hand corner, what is now the flag of Texas, the Lone Star. They are going to cry, "Remember the Alamo," and they are going to win a great battle at San Jacinto, where they defeat Santa Anna and the Mexican army that is located in Texas. Santa Anna decides to go ahead and sign a peace treaty with Texas. He grants them their independence and evacuates the Mexican army from the province of Texas. Texas is now its own country. It is known as the Lone Star Republic, and it is a fully independent country with its own president, its own Congress, all of that. The problem is that the rest of the government of Mexico does not recognize this treaty. They will not formally grant Texas its independence. To them, Texas is still Mexican, and it is just rebelling. It might be acting like it's independent. It is not formally independent, according to the government of Mexico. But the war is essentially over. To help protect them, and to help guarantee their freedom, especially their freedom to slaves, Texas is going to turn to the United States in 1836, and they are going to ask then President Andrew Jackson, "Will you annex us? Will you absorb us into the United States? Make us a state. Make us a state. We will be a southern slave state. We'll be part of the United States." Jackson says no. Van Buren says no, and William Henry Harrison was not in favor of it. Didn't really live long enough to say yes or no, but was not really for it. That is where our guy here in the bottom right-hand corner, John Tyler, the accidental president, in fact, his nickname becomes His Accidency, which sounds really messed up, but he wants to run for re-election, even though he betrayed the Democrats and left their party, and the Whigs literally said, "You gone." John Tyler says, "Hey, maybe if I decide to annex Texas, that'll make me popular enough with the people that it won't matter that I'm not a Whig anymore. I can get reelected." So he goes ahead and starts the process of annexing Texas. Now, it takes a little while, and it won't be until the 11th president, a man that we'll talk about next time named James K. Polk, is officially president, that Texas officially, oh, there's Ellie Dog, that Texas officially becomes the 28th state in the Union, but John Tyler is going to get that process started. Now, it fails for Tyler. He's not going to win re-election, but he is going to go ahead and open that can of worms of adding a new state, especially a slave state, right? Think about Missouri and what happened there. He's going to go ahead and do that in a desperate bid to remain president. And keep in mind, during all of this, it should have been Henry Clay, right? Should have been Henry Clay. But we are just about done. Last question on your activity sheet here, you might want to pause it again, would be, Well, hello, Ellie. Once Texas gained its independence, it asks to be annexed by the United States, right? Absorbed, become part of the United States. Jackson, Van Buren, Harrison decline. Tyler decides to go ahead in the hopes it's going to help his reelection, right? Like I just said. Is this a good idea? Is this a good idea? Why? Why not? What issues might this raise in the United States and with Mexico? Right? Remember what we just talked about with Mexico. So you might want to go ahead and pause it, answer it on your activity sheet. Don't submit them yet. I will tell you when, not today, maybe after the next one. But as I put on the updates page, there is also a wrap-up activity that goes along with this. Honors, you have another class discussion. I do want to say at this point, I've only read fifth periods because I'm doing this a day early. Excellent discussion so far. Really impressed with a lot of you. Really love it, and I don't want to just hear myself talk. I would like to, even if I'm just reading it, would like to hear from you guys. So we're going to continue with some class discussions. Go to the class discussion associated with this lecture. Contribute your input. Follow the directions from the updates page. On level, you get my boy, Mr. Betts. Go ahead, listen to the song that I have there for you. Write your wrap up, follow the instructions there, right? Again, every day, every odd day by 9 a.m., every even day by 9 a.m., check the updates page. That will have your work for the day. So until next time, remember, get those study guides. Wednesday of next week will be the odd day study guides are due. Thursday for you even. Any questions, any problems, any feedback, anything at all, just need to talk to someone that's not your mother or your little brother, email me, message me on Schoology. Remember, stay safe, stay sane, don't touch your face. All right? All right. Until next time, here. All right? Come on, here we go. All right. Bye.